He died, but his journey continued, a glimpse into the peaceful afterlife. As an ROTC cadet, he ventured through the rigors of U.S. Army ROTC basic training, stationed at the formidable Fort Knox, Kentucky. The journey commenced promptly after his high school graduation, thrusting him into the midst of the ROTC basic training intake for that year. Training progressed uneventfully until the third week, a pivotal moment when illness struck with the force of pneumonia, rendering him utterly feeble. His weakened state led to a morning when he lay bedridden, gripped by the chaotic clutches of delirium and violent coughing fits that produced unsettling pink foam. The absence of his presence at the formation prompted the vigilant drill sergeant to investigate, setting in motion a sequence of events that culminated in the arrival of a medic. Swift and necessary, a medical evaluation confirmed the gravity of his condition, prompting an urgent transfer to the base hospital via an awaiting ambulance. Inside the confines of the hospital, he was formally admitted, marking the commencement of a 3-night sojourn. Within the hospital's sterile walls, daily X-rays were administered, serving as the sentinel guardians of his treatment progress. His memory retains the existence of intravenous fluids coursing through his veins, although the specifics of the antibiotics and medications that coursed through his system elude his recollection. The concluding morning of his hospital stay unfurled, and he was being wheeled to the radiological chamber for an X-ray session. It was during this fateful X-ray examination that the trained radiological technician made a startling discovery, one that unfolded within the confines of the film, portraying an intricate and cryptic pattern etched within his beleaguered lungs. Within, a mesmerizing tapestry of nodes interconnected by delicate, barely visible lines painted a vivid portrait of affliction. Remarkably, despite the grip of disease upon both his lungs, the course of his hospitalization concluded with an unexpected turn. He was released back into the folds of his unit. However, the shroud of illness lingered, a relentless companion throughout his continued training endeavors, which he gallantly pursued alongside his fellow cadets. Upon the training's conclusion, he flew back home for a brief respite before commencing the fall term at the Military Institute. Still grappling with illness, he opted to drive to the school 2 weeks ahead of the class's start. The arduous journey took its toll on him, and upon arrival, he was once again plagued by a high fever and coughing up pink sputum. After getting settled in his room and discussing his condition with his tactical officer, he was swiftly admitted to the school's infirmary. The infirmary, housing only about 10 to 15 beds, was his refuge. There, he underwent examination, admission, and was allocated a bed. Considering his severe diarrhea and dehydration, he was immediately hooked up to an intravenous IV line. After the doctor's visit, he commenced a regimen of antibiotics alongside Lomotil, containing atropine, although he later discovered his hypersensitivity to atropine. His mornings began with visits to the infirmary, but it wasn't until the afternoons that he received IV fluids, antibiotics, and oral Lomotil. During his stay at the infirmary, he was resting and eventually dozed off. The exact duration of his sleep eludes him, but he awoke during the night. Alarming symptoms had taken hold. His heart was racing, his mouth was parched, and he experienced severe vertigo. He had never felt this way before, nor have since. The sense of impending doom weighed heavily on him, and he felt like he might be in grave danger or even dying. His attempts to summon assistance, first through the call button and later through yelling, were met with silence. His recollection of these events is somewhat hazy. However, he remembers managing to roll out of bed and collapsing onto the floor. Crawling out of his room and making his way toward the front of the infirmary, he clung to the IV stand and proceeded on hands and knees. He aimed for the nurse's station, where he knew he could seek help. He recalls kneeling in front of the counter and grasping its edge, endeavoring to pull himself up. Subsequently, the nurse on duty rushed around the counter and attempted to assist him. His memory is unclear regarding her words, but he remembers her departing briefly and returning with a male nurse or attendant. They secured a gurney and, along with another individual, hoisted him onto it. He was wheeled into a room at the front of the facility, directly across from the nurse's station. The room featured a sizable window facing the station. As he grew increasingly frail, his consciousness faded in and out. He believes they were preparing to hook him up to another IV, but that's the last memory he has while lying on the gurney. At some point, he regained consciousness, but from a completely different perspective. He was observing the activities in the room as if looking down from a point seemingly below the ceiling. His viewpoint was positioned about 3 feet behind his left shoulder and above his own body, affording him an extensive field of vision without tunnel vision. He could see the entire room, including his own figure on the gunny. One of the male attendants was engaged in performing CPR on him, while the other male attendant was using a bagging device. The female nurse was exiting the room, and a person in a blue jacket entered, seemingly taking charge of the situation while CPR continued. During this experience, he felt an extreme calmness and a complete absence of fear. He experienced mild curiosity about what was transpiring. He distinctly recalls thinking that if this was death, it wasn't so bad. Although he's uncertain of how long he remained in that state, there was no sense of urgency. He felt like a detached observer with little connection to the events transpiring below him. He still had a sense of self, but it was unattached to the physical world. He had no perception of the presence of others in the room, except for himself and the individuals involved in his treatment. He didn't see any bright light, tunnel, or similar experiences. The next thing he knew, he woke up and found himself back on the gurney with an IV and monitor attached. The person in the blue jacket, whom he assumed to be the doctor, was present in the room. The female nurse was there as well, but he can't be certain if she was the same nurse as before. The person in the blue jacket explained that he had suffered a severe reaction to a medication, likely the Lomotil. He informed him that he was fortunate to be alive. Initially, he suspected it was an allergic reaction, but later, he was informed it was more likely a hypersensitive reaction. From what he can recollect, he spent approximately 5 more days in the infirmary before being discharged. He remained profoundly weak, and the persistent cough led him to make the decision to skip the school year. He discussed his decision with the tactical officer and the school administration, obtained a release for the year, drove home, and spent the following 6 months recovering. In 1981, he returned to the military institute, attended for about 1.5 years, and ultimately decided that it wasn't the path for him. Consequently, he dropped out. And that's all for today's account. What are your thoughts on this experience? Feel free to share in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe and continue to be blessed.